cybersecurity insurance is similar to car insurance. All it's going to do is if you crash your car, it's going to help you cover some of your bills. Right. Cybersecurity insurance is the exact same thing. If you suffer from a cyber event, your cyber underwriter may cover some of the losses that you've had.
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, my name is Dino Busalaki. And today we have Lauren Blocker with us from Rockwell Automation. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, Dino. Great to be here.
I want to kind of begin with your journey into cybersecurity, specifically industrial cybersecurity, working from Rockwell. So can you kind of give us a little bio and background on Lauren's path to cybersecurity?
Sure, absolutely. Happy to do that. So I really started my career in telecommunications back in the 90s, if you can believe it. So the world was a very different place back then. And the real goal in the 90s and early 2000s was how do we help connect, right? How do we help organizations see through their digital transformation journey? A real critical piece of that is the plumbing. How do we connect? How do we make it efficient for organizations to connect their sites, their users, to the applications and data that was moving from on-prem primarily to data centers or cloud? So the first 15 plus years of my career were really spent helping IT organizations leverage that really critical foundation to making their digital transformation come true. And if you think back to the 1990s and the early 2000s, the notion of digital transformation was really focused on very different industry types than when we think about it today from an industrial point of view. So that was retail and finance and healthcare, hospitality and logistics. They were kind of more mature in that sense because those were the real drivers for business. I remember back in the, early 2000s, folks thinking about what does omni-channel retail look like and how do we build an infrastructure to support that type of connection to consumers, to users, to internal folks, to vendors. And that was really the mission statement of a lot of the work that I did. I worked with IT leaders and practitioners to help them build out efficiently these types of infrastructures to support that digital transformation. So fast forward to about 10 years ago, the notion of now we're connected. What risk does that pose to the business from a cybersecurity perspective? And, I think we maybe 10, 15 years ago were thinking if you weren't a targeted type of company or industry type, then you were good. You didn't really have to worry about it. But that really started to change after kind of the Stuxnet events started to occur and become front page news. And then organizations started to get the idea that, oh, maybe this could happen to us too. And what would the risk to the business be if that were to happen? So particularly in healthcare, there started to be a focus on how do we have this connected environment and ecosystem, but try to do it securely. Back then, we started seeing some of the first major ransomware events happen in the healthcare space. So there was a higher demand, I guess, in that healthcare space to really start talking about cybersecurity and best practices and things of that nature. Regulations also kind of started to pick up in those early 2000s. Again, really based on industry type. Are you a power gen? Do you run a nuclear power facility? Do you deliver product to the DoD and their compliance requirements filter down to you? Those types of organizations were really kind of leaning in and ahead of the game. When we look back on it now from 2024's vantage point, so I took a step into a very boutique managed cybersecurity organization and kind of started to have the opportunity to learn about what these different industry types and these different leaders, CISOs, CIOs, and IT practitioners in particular, what they valued from a cybersecurity perspective. I had an opportunity to really reflect on what was the next wave of digital transformation. Where was that coming from? And it became very clear to me that the next iteration of digital transformation was happening kind of right now in manufacturing, and that posed a really huge opportunity to help those organizations mature quicker, gain awareness, and start to develop and execute against programs that are industry standards based, to help them solve those problems that and their predecessors in other industries may have faced previously.
Yeah.
So that's what brought me to Rockwell a little over 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah. No, it's been an incredible journey. I've been going to Rockwell Automation Fair for over 20 years. So for me, going back, it's like almost like a high school reunion. Question is, how do you counter those? And I'm sure you hear that. I mean, we hear it in our business, those organizations that say, well, nobody's really targeting my control systems. When you start talking about cybersecurity on the OT plant floor, how is Rockwell handling those types of debates, if you will, from organizations that say, nobody's really going after my control systems?
Well, I would point to kind of front page news, and perhaps the target isn't control systems, but if you think about who the adversaries are, right? These are these highly funded, sometimes nation state type organizations, very sophisticated. They're not necessarily performing highly targeted events only. They're oftentimes really going after the low hanging fruit. And there can be a whole host of objectives that these organizations are trying to accomplish by performing these activities. And do we want to see what's going on? Do we want to try and steal IP? Do we want to cause a disruption in another nation state in preparation for some type of other event later on? Or do we want to break things, right? So we've seen where those types of activities take place. Again, highly funded, very sophisticated many adversary groups that are performing these activities, again, to do a whole host of different things. And so whether the question is, am I being targeted or not, is probably not the best question to start asking when you're beginning to take on an OT-centric type of cyber journey.
Yeah.
The question to ask is, if a cyber event were to happen, what then?
Yeah. Kind of like one of the things I like kind of talking is what I'll say to the executives: are you executing the same amount of due diligence to secure and protect your industrial environment as you do the enterprise, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're really challenged with there. And speaking to that, how's Rockwell handling trying to get more into being an industrial automation technology firm, getting to that IT leadership? Right. Even when I worked at Rockwell, that was kind of a little bit of a challenge for a lot of the account teams, is getting past the plant manager or even getting past just the local plant engineering and operations team. So is Rockwell starting to build into building relationships and finding an opportunity to get in front of that IT leadership, the CIO, the CISO, the security teams per se?
You're spot on. This is not the type of program that at a particular individual site or plant manager or maintenance manager role could really affect. In order to build out the awareness, the funding model, the adoption, the type of holistic view of OT cybersecurity, we really do need to have a different set of personas in the room than historically Rockwell has called on. And so you'll see, if you listen to any keynotes or follow any of our executive leaders on LinkedIn or elsewhere, you'll see there's a very concerted effort to really elevate the conversation, not just in our cybersecurity business, in our software and digital transformation business as well. We've had some very strategic acquisitions over the last 5 to 8 years that help bring in more value around services, consulting, solutions that augment the traditional Rockwell component and core business. So your question specifically is, how is Rockwell getting after and making these introductions and making an impact at a higher level, you'll see that our executive leadership team and all of us are really tasked with getting those kind of top to top discussions happening so that we can begin to build out the differentiators and show value in a different way.
And following on along those lines, obviously we're a Rockwell Platinum partner. How are we doing from an OT ecosystem, right? The OEMs, the system integrators, the Rockwell partners. Are we getting better? I mean, is Rockwell seeing us advancing and maturing in this OT cybersecurity journey? In your view, in Rockwell's view, generally speaking, and what are your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Dino. I think there's much like we can't paint with a single brush the experience and the maturity of the cyber journey of every single one of Rockwell's customers. We also really can't say broad strokes, everybody's doing X, right? What I have seen in the almost 6 years that I've been with Rockwell is there's more focus, there's more awareness. The kind of SI and distributor type of community is starting to place greater focus on individuals with network infrastructure, cybersecurity type of credentials that can help elevate the conversation towards here's what the standards are, here's what you should be doing. And again, the organizations, they vary greatly, right? You've got smaller ones, larger ones, integrators, different focus areas. But I would say that that ecosystem is responding to the need that all of our customers have jointly, which is we're not doing everything that we need to be doing to protect and prevent the worst thing from happening.
But and I believe we need to get better, right? I've been our podcast over the last year and a half now, I pushed that a lot, right? To the extent where I talk about cyber ready machines. If we're building a plant, which we're capable of doing, obviously building control systems, packaging systems, whatever type of machine centers the client is requiring, we're an OEM. Is building. What are your thoughts around building cyber ready machines, right? So you got a client that's using a cybersecurity platform, whatever stripe it might be, where we would actually start developing and implementing those cybersecurity technologies into our machine centers. What do you think about that cyber ready preparedness, sensor ready panels, or just being cyber ready in machines that are going in, being proactive versus reactive?
Yeah, so I know your business better than I do. I'm not a machine builder. I've never worked for a machine builder. We usually come in my role after the machines are built or when they're being stood up and the keys are being handed over. And the organization says, now what? So I think the idea of, is there one thing that an organization can do when you want to develop a holistic, standards-based, globally consistent program? That's a bit of a tall order, right? There's no easy button. There's no magic eraser to correct all of the issues that are inherent in these legacy systems. The idea of building from a security centric position is always a great place to start. But then the question is, what do we do about all of this legacy equipment that's elsewhere in our fleet, elsewhere in our estate? Having one machine or line that's up to standards, but 99 others that aren't, doesn't necessarily move the needle in a holistic way that an organization would need to. And that's really where we can come in to help kind of coach and create awareness around what does good look like and what is the appropriate level of risk that an individual company, their leadership, their shareholders, their executive board, what's an acceptable level of risk for them? And how do we build a holistic system across their fleet that gets them there over time?
Yeah, you're going down a good path. How often do you see clients that have actually that have started developing a roadmap, right? A framework, a security framework? Are you starting to see organizations really starting to build out a security framework? I mean, regulatory groups that have regulation requirements obviously have to do it, being asked to do it. But generally speaking, are you starting to see companies really begin building out a security framework, and who are all the players maybe involved in that, right? For the group, right? It can't be, to your point earlier, it can't just be the plant manager, right? So it has to be a consortium, which I think includes the partners also that are the OEMs and the system integrators, the third parties. Are you starting to see more frameworks being developed with your client base?
So here's what I typically see. The CISO, the InfoSec leadership within an organization has developed a framework, is adhering to governance and policies, and is checking and balancing against those reference documents that they've developed over time, either internally or with the help of a third party, perhaps one of the consulting organizations that's out there doing all that work. And so from an enterprise IT side of the house, that's fairly mature. So if you speak to a CISO and you say, how's your cybersecurity posture? They're going to be thinking about that plan that they put together in whatever, 2000 and whenever it was, and the iterative process they're following with secure their data and their laptops and servers and the firewall rules and how they've stress tested their incident response plan and so on. The challenge is there's a whole set of connected assets that many CISOs don't even think about when they're asked about their cybersecurity, but it may not be explicitly in their purview. And that's all of the connected assets in their manufacturing facilities. That's their safety systems and their production and their PLCs and their switches that are running all of that stuff and creating data and maybe pushing that data to a place where it lives. But there's just a lack of visibility to that huge set of connected assets and everything that they're doing in thinking about what's my cybersecurity plan? What does it look like? Right. So on the one hand, it's the tale of two cities, right? You've got the really mature, iterative, standards-based, we've got this on the enterprise IT with that set of assets, but a whole lot of not much for the OT assets, and maybe not even a visibility to the fact that that is in their purview or should be. And so when I start to get these calls and emails from folks within the client organization saying, oh no, there's just this executive mandate that came down and I'm responsible for OT now too. What's OT? Literally, what is OT? And so we have this great opportunity to be that trusted advisor and start the education process around what do you have. And if you want to see the steam come out of a CISO's ears, start talking to them about what's typical in OT from a life cycle perspective, from a pitching perspective, from a just very informal way of connecting and making things work. That's a great opportunity for them to go, okay, wow, I didn't know. And now I know. And what do we do about it?
What would a CIO or CISO say if you found a Windows 7 machine on their network, right? And then their first response, well, they would say, get it off, right? Get it off. On your plant floor, that's a little bit more difficult, right? So let me pivot to one of the things that we're seeing, and your perspective on this would be really good, cybersecurity insurance, right? Because we've witnessed clients that can't get it, right? Or they've got some new requirements coming at them. Let's talk about MFA for a second for other control systems, right? So what is Rockwell seeing from the cybersecurity insurance industry, and what kind of, we've talked about regulatory things driving that. Are you starting to see the cybersecurity insurance start trying to change behavior and improve activity on that front?
I feel like cybersecurity insurance is similar to car insurance. All it's going to do is if you crash your car, it's going to help you cover some of your bills. Right. Cybersecurity insurance is the exact same thing. If you suffer from a cyber event, your cyber underwriter may cover some of the losses that you've had.
For remediation and mitigation, but not business disruption. Yes, that's true.
It doesn't cover business disruption. It's not going to cover the brand impact that you could have or the other flow downs that you could have based on where you are in your individual customer supply chain, whatever that looks like. The idea here is much like with a compliance requirement, don't teach to the test, right? You don't want to just do the bare minimum to get coverage. You don't want to do just the bare minimum and check those boxes to achieve compliance. Because if you do just that, you're never going to be secure. You're never going to build out that, iterative roadmap to consistent improvement in cyber maturity. If you focus more on I want to be secure, I want to mitigate those impacts if, when, should they happen, and you focus on it from security being the goal, then you will check those boxes, whether it's from compliance or a potential cyber insurance underwriter. You will overachieve those. And more importantly, you'll bring business value to shareholders, executives, the board, and everybody who depends for their livelihood on the business running and staying in business.
So what do you see as some of the dynamics that are out there that are shaping industrial cybersecurity today? When you look across the portfolio of technologies, I think I heard a stat a month or so ago that there's 5,000 cybersecurity technologies out there, right? What are you really seeing leading the charge? And not a specific vendor or anything like that, but what's really shaping this industry for us from your purview?
So, yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind when you ask that question, Dino. I think about it from who's going after this kind of white space, right? This problem looking for solutions. And you've absolutely seen over the last 5 years or so, organizations that historically are focused on the enterprise IT space, be they vendors or software providers or consultants or even some of the big four, really trying to pivot their capabilities, add people, add support to focus on the needs of the industrial controls environments. Right? It's not necessarily, you can't just necessarily drop an IT tool or an IT skilled person into an OT environment and have the kind of outcome that you would need to have. So there's kind of that, right? You can name all the names that you can think of where you've got boxes with blinky lights on them and name brands on them. All those organizations are trying to pivot a little bit to be more industrial controls centric, again, with mixed kind of results. Then you'll see organizations like Rockwell and our ecosystem, including your company, that are trying to leverage our OT expertise and gain insights and thought leadership and solutions that are specifically OT oriented and starting to talk the IT talk a little bit more. Again, not everybody's following that certainly is, and I know many other organizations are starting to make those types of investments and bring in strategic partners, have Rockwell ourselves, we've had some strategic acquisitions over the last 5 years to help build out our thought leadership, our expertise, our capabilities, our global footprint to help meet customers where they are and have solutions for them at kind of every step along the way. I think another thing that we're starting to hear a lot more is organizations trying to align internally with what the standards should be. So we hear a lot about the NIST cybersecurity framework in the US, IEC 62443 from a global perspective. For our friends in Europe, the notion around NIST 2 and what they need to kind of get behind to all be speaking from the same sheet of music, if you will, so that the organization internally is aligned. And once that happens, the light bulbs start lighting up pretty quick around the awareness piece. Where are we? Where are we out of compliance? Where are we out of governance with what our organization feels is appropriate? And then once that awareness is gained, if you've got the right leaders in the room who are engaged and focused on improvement, then it becomes a whole lot easier to let's solve this together.
You touched on something earlier. You talked about resources, right? Key thing. So how we're definitely short on resources with the skill sets that we're talking about, right? That kind of have that
Right.
blend of a cybersecurity, technology, IT background, at the same time, understanding process and control systems. How is Rockwell tackling the resource shortage out there, number one? And number two, are you starting to see the universities start bringing cybersecurity from an industrial perspective into their programs from an academic perspective? Are you starting to see any of that?
So let's start with what Rockwell's doing. We have a 100+ year heritage of expertise in the OT space, right? That's in our DNA. So our training programs, our everything that we do with employees is all about helping those folks who come in with engineering degrees from some of the best universities or externally and have those skill sets to get really nitty gritty with the needs of OT and our portfolio of core competencies. We take some of those folks who have the interest and cross train them in cybersecurity and networks and infrastructure and that sort of professional services organization that we have, pivot them into more of a customer facing role that's focused on OT cybersecurity. So that is a continued work in progress. You may know from your time at Rockwell what a huge investment we like to make in our employees,
Sure.
right from the ground up and continuing on. If you have that desire to be curious and continuously learn, Rockwell is a really great place to be.
Class A firm,
Now,
without a doubt.
so from a university perspective, there's a lot of cybersecurity programs that are out there. My oldest son graduated with a master's degree in computer science. He is now a software engineer. Is he doing anything in OT? I mean, not specifically. He works for a contractor. So he has his hands on multiple different things. But to say that organizations or universities have or are building out a huge program around OT centric cybersecurity, I personally have not seen that. So to me, it feels like we take folks that have the aptitude, the curiosity, and the base level knowledge and augment with various different types of certifications and hands-on.
Yeah, even myself, I've witnessed. I hired two chemical engineers from great schools just in the last few years, and even though they went to school to be chemies, their interest shifted into cybersecurity around industrial. And the nice thing about the kids, I call them because I can't, I'm old enough. To go into engineering programs, part of their engineering program before they graduate is they got to do internships, right?
That's right.
In manufacturing. So at least they have a little bit of a background on what these environments look like, right? And working in an industrial environment. I think that's a plus, right? So Lauren, the question in regards to IT leadership, the executives, how do you think that they perceive Rockwell in this space, knowing that they're primarily just working in what they would think is just their plant floor systems?
That's a great question. And it does come up quite often. So if IT leaders or InfoSec leaders are familiar with Rockwell at all, oftentimes they're not. They think of the normal manufacturers that they do business with, their switch providers, their cloud providers, their software providers, maybe some of their consulting partners, their firewall vendors. When they think of Rockwell, if they know who we are, they think of us as a PLC provider and a PLC provider only, and one of not maybe the primary one in their business, but by no means the only vendor that provides manufacturing automation in their space. Many times we'll start this conversation and a CISO will say, why would I come to you for a holistic solution when all you're going to do is look at Rockwell and tell me to buy more Rockwell? So we have absolutely a response to that, and that is obsolescence risk, vulnerability, cyber risk cannot only be focused on one manufacturer in your estate. It needs to take into consideration your Rockwell content, of course, but everything else that exists in your environment if you want your program to be holistic and to adhere to those types of standards, national.
Meaning you're agnostic, right? If it's Siemens
right.
in there, Emerson in there, GE, Schneider, it doesn't really matter from a Rockwell perspective when you're talking about the cybersecurity journey and how you holistically, using your term, go after how you're going to improve your cybersecurity posture and your manufacturing plant floor. So as we wrap up, what key advice would you offer to anybody who's listening to our podcast on how to start this journey? And then the last thing I would say is there anything that you would like to add that I didn't ask you that you would like to convey to our audience?
Yeah, thanks, Dino. I would say it's tough to boil the ocean, right? Once you break out of that awareness phase and start digging into the reality of what exists from an inherent vulnerability perspective, from a obsolescence risk perspective, right? From a gap between what IT thinks is happening and what may actually be happening on the shop floor. Once we start digging into that, lean in, keep digging into that. And if you need support, if you need a partner, we exist. We're out here. We can help get to over that kind of scary hump of the bad report card, if you will, of all the things that are wrong, and help get to a place where we know that the activities that are happening after getting that bad report card are building a foundation for a standards-based program that can help you keep getting after it year after year after year. Because the fact of the matter is there's no finish line in cybersecurity. You're never done. You can move the levers and you can get that low-hanging fruit, but next week, next month, there's another vulnerability that didn't exist today. And so there needs to be that kind of focus, attention, funding, and support for that long-term program. And right? It's something new, and we're trying to do more with less. Everybody is. But this is a critical piece to the success of not just these individual organizations, but in many cases, the American way of life.
All right. Well, thank you, Lauren. Thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
Dino, it was a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.